You, Christina?
Yes.
Okay, Christina, do me a favor. Can you step out of the car for me?
A respected high school teacher, a trusted coach, now accused of one of the most serious betrayals imaginable, having a sexual relationship with one of her students. This is the case of Christina Formella, a 33-year-old former special education teacher from Downers Grove, just outside Chicago. Prosecutors say she crossed every professional and moral line, carrying on an illegal affair with a teenage boy she once taught, inside her own classroom and even in her family home. But what began as whispers in the school hallway soon exploded into a criminal investigation that exposed hundreds of text messages, secret meetings, and a trail of evidence too large to ignore. When officers approached Christina's car that evening, she appeared calm, polite, and confused. She had no idea the reason for their stop, or that detectives had already built a case against her. Inside her vehicle sat her husband, watching as officers asked her to step out. Within minutes, she was handcuffed, told she was being detained, and driven to the Downers Grove Police Department for questioning. What police would reveal next, and what investigators later found inside her phone, would turn this story into one of the most talked-about teacher-student scandals in Illinois history. Court documents say the investigation started months earlier when a teenage boy's mother discovered a string of text messages on her son's phone. Messages so explicit and emotional that she immediately went to police. The messages read like a romance between adults. "I love you so much, baby. Even though this morning was short, it was perfect." Another message read, "I love having sex with you." The sender? Investigators say it was Christina Formella. According to prosecutors, those messages led police to uncover more than 50 incidents of sexual contact, beginning in January 2023, inside classrooms, in parking lots, and later, inside her own home while her husband was away. But when questioned by detectives, Christina denied everything. She claimed she was being targeted because of her looks, and that people were trying to destroy her life. She insisted that she only cared too much about the student, that it was misunderstood. Still, police say the evidence told a different story. In her phone, detectives found notes that read like private letters, confessions filled with frustration, heartbreak, and anger. In one note she wrote, "I'm not sad. I'm angry that I let a 16-year-old mess with me like that. I'll never let anyone do that again." Another note suggested she believed the boy would come back to her, that they would find closure, and stay in each other's lives forever. To prosecutors, those weren't just words, they were proof of obsession and control. And as the investigation deepened, the charges multiplied. Christina Formella was indicted on 52 counts, including aggravated criminal sexual abuse, indecent solicitation, and grooming. The court placed her on GPS monitoring and barred her from coming within 5,000 feet of the victim. But just weeks later, she appeared in court again, asking the judge to loosen those restrictions. Her reason? The teen was now working less than a mile from her home. Standing beside her was her husband, Michael. Cameras captured them walking into the courtroom hand in hand. But prosecutors didn't buy her request. They argued that she had already manipulated the victim once, and the judge agreed. The motion was denied. What followed in that courtroom stunned many. Prosecutors revealed that Formella had allegedly promised the student she'd leave her husband and take millions in a divorce settlement. It was a moment that painted a clearer picture of the double life she was living. A wife at home, a teacher at school, and in secret, a woman caught in an unlawful relationship with a teenager. As Christina sat silently, hearing those details read aloud, cameras rolled. For the first time, the public saw the woman behind the scandal, not the smiling teacher from school photos, but a defendant facing decades in prison. But even then, she maintained her innocence. The case of Christina Formella isn't just about one teacher and one student, it's about power, influence, and the hidden relationships that can exist behind classroom doors. And as the trial date approaches, new details continue to emerge, including messages, confessions, and claims that reveal how far this relationship may have gone. How did a respected educator lose everything in a matter of months? What truly happened inside that classroom, and who's telling the truth? Inside a Downers Grove patrol car, Christina Formella sits in silence. Her hands rest in her lap, her voice quiet. The reality of her arrest begins to sink in. Moments earlier, she had been calm, asking officers what was happening, still unsure of why she was being detained. But the officers knew. A detective was waiting for her at the station, and he had the text messages, the screenshots, and the witness statements that would change everything. As the car pulls away, Christina turns to the officer. Her voice breaks as she asks a question every suspect asks. "Am I in trouble?" The officer doesn't answer directly. He simply says, Once we get there, they'll explain everything. At the police station, detectives begin recording. They inform Christina of her rights, then start asking questions. From the beginning, her tone is defensive but polite. She denies any sexual contact with the teenage boy, claiming that their connection was emotional, that she simply wanted to help him. She tells investigators that the student misunderstood her kindness, that he became attached, and that she didn't know how to push him away without hurting him. But detectives have already seen the messages. They've already read the words, "I love having sex with you," and "This morning was perfect." When confronted, Christina insists the texts were fabricated or taken out of context. She claims people at school were jealous of her, that rumors had been circulating for months, and that she was being targeted because she was attractive. Detectives stay patient, asking about the locations mentioned in the messages: the classroom, the house, the hotel. She denies them all. Then they bring up the phone notes. Hidden inside her own iPhone were pages of personal writing, reflections, arguments, even affirmations that prosecutors later called manifestations. In them, Christina wrote about heartbreak, anger, and a 16-year-old boy she said had messed with her emotions. But investigators weren't convinced. They had statements from the teenage boy describing their encounters in detail, including times, locations, and descriptions of what happened inside her locked classroom before school. He told police that she closed the door, kissed him, and that what began as innocent touching quickly escalated into something else. He described her home, her car, and the exact spot in her living room where they met. Every time he mentioned a detail, detectives found a match, from her work schedule to her travel photos on social media. Still, Christina didn't break. She stayed calm, denying every allegation, even as her own phone notes contradicted her. After hours of questioning, detectives decided they had enough. Christina Formella was placed under formal arrest and booked into the county jail. At booking, her mugshot was taken, eyes red, expression blank. For a woman once known as a respected teacher, it was the image of a life unraveling in front of cameras and courtroom spectators. But even after that, she wasn't giving up. Days later, Christina's attorney filed a motion to modify her release terms. The request was simple: reduce the 5,000-foot restriction around the alleged victim to 2,500 feet. She said it made daily life impossible because the boy now worked near her neighborhood. When she entered the courtroom, her husband was by her side again, holding her hand. The same man prosecutors said she once planned to leave for millions, was now standing beside her in support. Inside, the prosecution pushed back. They argued that the victim deserved distance and protection, not convenience. They reminded the judge of the messages, the frequency of the contact, and the power imbalance that had defined the relationship. The judge listened carefully, then ruled against Christina. The buffer zone would stay. It was a small moment in court, but a powerful one. It told the public that the case wasn't fading away. It was gaining momentum. Behind the scenes, investigators continued collecting evidence: hundreds of texts, digital footprints, and surveillance data. Prosecutors said that between January 2023 and September 2024, Christina and the student communicated almost daily. Some messages were affectionate. Others hinted at conflict, jealousy, and threats to end things. The boy eventually told police that by September 2024, he realized the relationship was wrong and tried to cut off contact. That decision triggered what prosecutors later described as emotional retaliation. She messaged him even while vacationing overseas, sending texts from Italy during a trip with her husband. Those messages would later appear in court, showing that even abroad, she couldn't let go. For prosecutors, the story was clear. A teacher who groomed a teenager built emotional control and used her authority to create dependency. For Christina's defense, the story was different: a misunderstood friendship, exaggerated by gossip and overreach. But both sides knew this. The evidence found in her phone could decide everything. As Christina Formella's case moves into the courtroom, every message, every photo, every digital trace becomes evidence. Prosecutors arrive with files stacked high, months of investigation distilled into pages that reveal how a secret relationship unfolded behind the walls of a high school. They begin by presenting the text messages, hundreds of exchanges between teacher and student. Each one shows a shift in tone, from innocent encouragement to emotional attachment and finally to physical intimacy. Jurors see words once meant for a private phone screen, now read aloud in a silent courtroom. They hear phrases of affection, arguments, and apologies that paint a picture of obsession, control, and blurred boundaries. Prosecutors describe how the contact began with tutoring sessions and after-school help. What started as messages about classwork turned into late-night conversations. By the time the student's mother discovered the texts, the connection had already become sexual. Then comes the digital evidence. Forensic analysts testify about data extracted from Formella's phone, deleted photos recovered, location pings matched to school hours, and even timestamps aligning with security camera footage. One expert explains how several messages were deleted minutes after being sent, yet remained preserved through backups. The records show patterns: communication before school, again during breaks, and long threads after midnight. Next, prosecutors display handwritten notes taken from her phone's notepad app. They aren't addressed to anyone, but their meaning is unmistakable. In one, she writes about closure, about reconnecting soon, about forever being in each other's lives. To the prosecution, these are not just random thoughts, they're evidence of ongoing desire and refusal to let go. The courtroom listens as investigators recount how the teenage boy finally came forward. It was his mother who first noticed the unusual behavior: secrecy with his phone, sudden mood swings, and reluctance to go to school. While setting up his new device, she found the messages that started it all. She immediately reported what she saw. Within hours, detectives began tracing the number behind the texts, leading straight to Christina Formella's phone. Sound effect: faint gavel tap. The defense argues that the messages could be misinterpreted, that they reflect emotional dependency, not criminal intent. They suggest the boy exaggerated the story under pressure, and that Christina's writings were just emotional outbursts, not confessions. But prosecutors remind the court that there were more than 50 separate encounters detailed by the teen, each with specific locations and times that matched Christina's own movements. Then the testimony shifts toward her marriage. Her husband, Michael, sits quietly behind the defense table. Prosecutors claim Christina confided in the student that she planned to leave Michael, promising to take a large settlement once she filed for divorce. It's a claim that deepens the betrayal, not only to the victim's family but also to her own. The camera captures Michael's expression as prosecutors read the statement aloud. He doesn't react, doesn't speak, just stares forward as his wife's private words echo through the courtroom. During cross-examination, the defense points out that Christina has no prior criminal record, that she had been a respected educator and volunteer. They argue that she suffered from emotional strain, overwork, and poor judgment, not criminal intent. But the prosecution counters that she knew the law, that her role as a teacher carried responsibility, and that every message she sent proved intent and awareness. As each piece of evidence is presented, Christina remains mostly silent. Occasionally she wipes her eyes or whispers to her attorney, but her gaze never leaves the floor. Outside the courtroom, reporters gather. The case becomes headline news, a story that blends betrayal, education, and crime in one headline. Parents in the community express shock. Former students speak to journalists, some defending her kindness, others describing moments they now see differently. Inside, the proceedings continue. The judge reviews the messages, the testimony, the expert analysis. The prosecution calls the case a calculated abuse of trust. The defense maintains that it's a tragedy of perception, that Christina's compassion was mistaken for manipulation. As the hearing concludes, the judge rules that there is enough evidence for the case to move toward trial. Christina will remain under strict GPS monitoring, forbidden from contacting the student or going near any school property. Her lawyer says she intends to fight every charge. Prosecutors prepare for a trial that could last weeks, with more than 50 counts still on the table. Outside the courthouse, cameras flash as Christina walks to her car beside her husband. She keeps her head down, surrounded by silence, the sound of shutters clicking in the cold air. The community watches, waiting for the next move. For the teenage boy and his family, this is not just a case, it's a fight for accountability and healing. For Christina Formella, it's a battle to prove that her version of events is the truth. And for everyone watching, it's a reminder of how fragile trust can be, how one decision can change everything. A career, a marriage, and a young life. The day of the trial arrives. The courtroom is packed. Reporters, former students, parents, and silent observers waiting to hear how justice will unfold. Christina Formella sits beside her defense attorney, her hands clasped tightly together. Across the room, the prosecution team prepares their opening remarks. The charges are read aloud, each one echoing through the hall like a weight pressing on everyone inside. Over 50 counts. Each representing a separate act, each carrying its own penalty. The judge reminds the jury of their duty, to set aside sympathy, to look only at evidence. The prosecution begins by telling the jury what they intend to prove, That Christina Formella used her authority and access as a teacher to build a relationship with her student, then crossed a line no educator should ever cross. They show photographs of the messages, printouts of the deleted texts, and the phone logs showing late-night contact. They replay the recordings from police interviews, where Christina hesitates before answering, pausing just long enough to make the room question her truth. The prosecution calls the teenage boy to the stand. His voice shakes at first, but his story remains consistent. He recounts how the messages began, how they met in her classroom after hours, and how fear kept him silent. As he testifies, the courtroom listens in near total stillness. Even the hum of air conditioning feels louder. He describes moments of confusion, guilt, and shame. He says he thought she cared about him, that she told him they were different, that what they shared was special. When he finishes, the courtroom exhales. The judge calls for a recess. Reporters rush outside to summarize what they've just heard. The defense takes its turn. They call former colleagues and friends to the stand, teachers who describe Christina as caring, reliable, deeply devoted to her students. They insist this was a misunderstanding, a misreading of emotional dependence. Her lawyer argues that Christina was overwhelmed, a teacher balancing stress, isolation, and a collapsing marriage. That she confided in the student because she felt safe talking to him. That what the state calls exploitation was, in her mind, a friendship that spiraled out of control. But prosecutors counter quickly. They remind jurors that Christina was the adult, the one in power, the one trained to know better. They replay her own words from a message, "No one can ever know about this." That single line, projected on a screen for everyone to see, becomes a turning point. Over the next few days, both sides argue fiercely. The defense leans on emotional instability, the prosecution leans on the law. Witness after witness takes the stand. Digital experts describe backup recoveries and location data. Investigators walk through photos, text threads, and voice notes. The evidence is overwhelming. And while Christina's lawyer insists that her actions were misguided but not malicious, the timeline tells a different story. When Christina herself takes the stand, she appears calm but weary. Her attorney asks if she loved the student. She shakes her head, saying she cared, but it wasn't love, it was compassion that turned into confusion. Under cross-examination, the prosecution presses her on every inconsistency. Why delete the text? Why tell him to stay quiet? Why meet outside school hours? Each question digs deeper. Her answers shrink shorter. Finally, she breaks down, saying she didn't mean to hurt anyone. The courtroom stays silent. The judge calls for order as whispers rise. In closing arguments, prosecutors say this case is not about emotions, it's about choices. They tell the jury that trust is sacred, and that Christina shattered it. They remind them that this was not one mistake, but a pattern repeated again and again. The defense delivers its final plea. They ask for mercy, reminding the jury that Christina has already lost her career, her reputation, and her peace. They describe her as human, flawed, remorseful, broken. After hours of deliberation, the jury returns. The courtroom fills once more. The judge asks if a verdict has been reached. Christina Formella shows no immediate reaction. Her eyes remain fixed forward. Her husband sits behind her, motionless. The judge sets sentencing for a later date. As the deputies approach, Christina stands quietly, hands clasped. She's escorted out of the courtroom as cameras flash once more. Outside, the community is divided. Some say justice was served, others say the punishment feels too heavy. But for the victim's family, it's closure, the end of months of fear, the beginning of healing. Inside the courtroom, the judge's final words linger. No one is above the responsibility that comes with trust. The trial of Christina Formella becomes one of the most talked about cases of its kind. For educators, it's a warning. For parents, a lesson in awareness. And for the justice system, another reminder that truth always finds its way to the surface, no matter how long it takes. And that concludes today's case. What are your thoughts on the court's decision and Christina Formella's actions? Let us know down in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, share it with others who follow true crime, and subscribe for more real cases and courtroom moments.